Here in part 2 of the Rotary AS2066 movement, after it's been through the cleaning machine, we begin the reassembly by fitting the mainspring into the barrel, and the barrel is fitted onto the main plate, followed by the barrel bridge. You'll note that the click is still in place at this point, and that's removed and lubricated after refitting the barrel bridge. You'll note also that I'm trying a different angle here. I've actually managed to set up my better quality camera and trying to get a bit of a more direct from above angle. So let me know in the comments what you think regarding this. The next step is the assembly of the train wheels. The second wheel is fitted first, and what I didn't show here, I thought I'd actually videoed it but couldn't find it when I was editing the video, but the sliding pinion on the second wheel is lubricated with a small amount of 9010 right on the tip where it connects to the shaft of the wheel. And then the third wheel is wiggled into place. As you can see, it's a little bit of a juggling act. Now they're both seated. And then the S-gate wheel, which slides underneath the third wheel, like so. And then the fourth wheel, which goes through the centre pivot to drive the seconds hand. And a small amount of lubrication is added to the pivot of the fourth wheel before inserting. The final wheel to be fitted is the intermediate winding wheel for the automatic winding work. And then the train bridge is fitted on the top of this. A little bit of wiggling is needed to get everything to seat, as the entirety of the train wheels are underneath this train bridge, but it doesn't take too much work. Swiss watches tend to be very well made and are much more apt to drop into place compared to some other watches. And there I'm just checking that everything's meshing correctly and everything's in the pivot holes and spinning. We then fit the 3 retaining screws, and as mentioned previously, there are 2 domed headed screws which fit into this decorated outer portion, and then the flat headed screw fits into the third hole by the mainspring barrel. They're all the same length, so fitting them incorrectly as they were originally won't affect the movement and the operation of the movement. As you can see, I put the wrong one in there, so I was just swapping them around. It won't affect the operation of the movement, but it's just visually more appealing to have them in the correct place. And once more, I'm just checking that everything rotates freely as it should. Before finally tightening up the 3 screws. And it's important to have your oil pot nearby and correctly labelled. At this point here, I'm fitting the pallet fork, and I did actually try to video my oiling of the pallet stones, but unfortunately, because I have to bend right over with a high magnification loupe to see exactly where I'm placing the oil droplet, my head was in the way of the video, so you couldn't actually see anything but the back of my head. So unfortunately I wasn't able to add that in here. Now fit the pallet fork, pallet cock there, and just check for free movement before seating that and screwing it down. Here I'm fitting the click spring, which is a very small thin shepherd's crook spring. A small amount of lubrication is applied to the end where it engages with the click, and there you can see I'm just holding that in place with my finger as I tease the spring into place with the brass tweezers. And there I'm just applying a small amount of grease onto the very tip of the spring. Next to be fitted is the ratchet wheel, and you'll note that I completely forgot to oil the barrel arbor pivot, and this I realise a little later as I'm oiling the train wheel pivots, and I go ahead and remove the ratchet wheel again to oil that pivot and replace it. And you can see here the Rotary logos on the ratchet wheel as mentioned in the disassembly video, and these weren't visible during the disassembly because the ratchet wheel had been fitted upside down. So although this watch had actually been cared for and looked after and serviced quite nicely, there was a couple of things, such as the misplacement of the screws on the train bridge and the ratchet wheel being fitted upside down. Neither of which affected the performance or operation of the watch. It's just one of those sort of niggling little things. And there I'm fitting the collar and a small amount of grease to the crown wheel. The next item to be fitted is the balance, and this is always a nice moment when you pop the balance on after a little wind of the ratchet wheel. I usually do one full wind just to make sure everything spins well and moves quite freely with a good amplitude. You should get at least 180 degrees on a single full wind of the ratchet wheel. So I like to do that. Some people like to put a few more winds on. It's personal preference, but I like to do this because it gives me a good idea of whether I have a good amplitude to begin with. And remember, this is prior to oiling the train wheels and the end stones. And there you can see that's beating away nicely, and got a little close-up of that where you can see the the pallets locking and unlocking. I'm trying to make the most of this new camera setup and get some nice close-up shots. And next I start the oiling by removing the chaton and the end stones from the balance. I normally use Rodico to pop these out because it's just so much easier, but here I'm trying to use the tweezers just so that you can get a visual on that. And as you can see, the chaton actually pinged out there whilst I was trying to grab it. And here I've tried to get you a little bit of a close-up of oiling with the version 1A automatic oiler, which is a really handy tool. It can of course be done manually, but this is a fabulous tool for anybody who's interested in servicing watches, and it's absolutely invaluable for end stones on train wheels on Seiko movements, for example. And at this point, you wouldn't ordinarily do this, but I'm actually removing the chaton from the end stone just to give you a visual of the oil droplet that the automatic oiler leaves. As you can see, you've got a lovely round droplet right in the middle of the end stone there. And ordinarily, as said, you wouldn't actually remove this other than when you were perhaps initially setting up the oiler. You would just take the complete assembled stone and replace that. And there I'm oiling the pivots of the train. And apologies for my head obscuring some of that there. At this point, this is where I remembered that I hadn't actually oiled the barrel arbor, and so I go ahead and remove the ratchet wheel and do so. Once again, apologies for my head partially obscuring the shot there. Now go on to the dial side of the movement, and I proceed to oil the balance end stone and the train wheels on the dial side in exactly the same manner. You'll note on the dial side that the barrel arbor is not in a jeweled hole, whereas it is on the other side. At this point, I decided to leave the remainder of the reassembly for a separate video, as this one is actually getting quite long already. So just about here, before I start assembling the dial side components, we'll leave that, and I will see you in the third video. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.